Anyway, I was watching the X-Files earlier on today.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it was the episode where, hey you and welcome, this is That Chapter Podcast. It was the episode when Mulder and Scully, they go to the boat. You know the one that's like in a boat, it's like somewhere in the Arctic, and the boat makes them really old. They age rapidly while on the boat.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, it's so funny when they're wearing the really shitty makeup and they're like, I'm old.
Yeah.
It's so fucking stupid. But man, the X-Files is so good. I've been on a binge of it lately.
Nice.
X-Files is like my comfort show.
Yeah. You seem to go through like phases of like you're mad about X-Files and then you'll kind of you'll fall over for a while, and then usually around Halloween you're back into it again, going home.
Yeah. Well, I'm already excited for Halloween. I mean, we're recording this like late May, early June, and I cannot wait for Halloween. I'm sick of summer already. But you know what? The thing about X-Files is the ones that are like the overarching kind of plot line, like the alien invasion or whatever. Skip. Pass, fucking bull. I don't give a shit. Yeah. Give me the Monster of the Week episodes where it's like, I was watching the other episode where it's like set in a school. It opens up and it's just these people in a school, like school counselors or whatever, just talking at a teacher meeting. And they're like, talking about a play that we have to do. And it's like, would this be acceptable to do it with the kids? And they're debating it. And then just towards, all right, we should probably finish up this meeting. Hail Satan! They start doing this like weird demonic chants. It's awesome. That's a really good episode, actually.
Yeah, I like the one that are kind of real culty. I always find it mad as well. Like, they had to keep it going throughout the whole show. But at the end, Scully's always kind of like, I don't know, maybe. He's like, are you serious? After all you've been through.
Yeah, you've literally seen the devil. And you're like, not sure.
Could be something else. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I guess they wanted to keep up that kind of dichotomy where she's like the religious one and Mulder's not religious.
Yes,
but he believes and she doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if you believe in God, do you not believe in invisible men who have lived 500 years in the Florida rainforest?
Right.
Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, it's not a huge leap.
Yeah, but it's so good. Speaking of stuff that's so good, actually, Mike's horror movie reviews makes its triumphant return. I got two movies for you. One I just finished a couple of minutes before you came up, actually. One really, really good. The other one really... So the one that was really bad was The Taking of Deborah Logan.
Oh, I've heard about that, yeah.
Yeah, so both movies I watched are fan footage because that's the only horror movies I like to watch, frankly. So The Taking of Deborah Logan. Wow, what a giant piece of shit that movie is. Really? Yeah, it's fucking terrible. So it starts out and it's about these college kids. They're going to do like a video project of this woman who's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I guess, to follow, what it's like for And then, of course, weird things start happening. And, it's like, paranormal stuff starts happening. Then, anyway, it turns out that the woman who's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she's being taken over by the spirit of a pedophile she killed.
Oh, okay.
And it's pretty fucked up towards the end of the movie, but it's just awful. Like really, really a bad movie. Badly written, badly acted, badly directed, badly edited. Everything about the movie is just a giant piece of shit. The only thing I sort of seen, and I've seen it before I watched the movie, was like this, it's like horror clips. It's like there's one point she tries to like swallow a child. She like descends her jaw and like tries to swallow a child like a snake. It's very like creepy image.
I was kind of like that film Smile.
Yeah, exactly like that. But other than that, no, skip. Big pass on that.
Okay.
The other movie I watched though that I thought was excellent was a Korean horror movie called Ganjam, I think it's called. Wait, 1 second. Let me just bring it up because I want to make sure I'm getting this right. Man, because the Koreans make some really good horror movies. I talked about, Ganjam, Haunted Asylum.
Ooh.
Because I've talked about Exuma and The Wailing before here on the podcast. So this one, it's another found footage horror movie. Now, it's very much like Grave Encounters, a fan favorite. Me and Keith are the fans.
That's the best.
It's such a I think it's a great movie. It's very funny, but also like it has some really good scares.
I can't pick one fault with that movie, to be honest.
Okay, I can pick a few, but we'll move on.
They're all great.
But it's good. It's I like the way it just starts off as a piss take of like Zach Baggins and those like fucking rejects. So this kind of starts out on a very similar premise. It's actually this movie Gunjam, it's sort of derivative because it does follow a lot of the same plot lines as that one. Like, so instead of ghost hunters like in Grave Encounters, they're YouTubers, horror YouTubers. Okay. So they go to this haunted asylum. There's like 3 of the people are like the people who work on the thing, and then they have 4 volunteers who go in with them. Yeah. And a cool kind of gimmick in the show is that they have GoPros on them. So they have one GoPro looking like following their viewpoint, looking forward, and then one GoPro looking at them. So 2 GoPros looking the opposite direction. So you're getting their kind of facial reaction a lot of time too.
Is there times when like they miss something?
Yeah, you see it? Okay, exactly. Yeah, it's cool like that. So, but then of course, they go to the asylum and some of the stuff is faked. But then the fake stuff starts to become real.
Oh no!
And then they can't get out of the asylum, and that they're going forever. You know, it's a lot of
Grave Encounter shot for shot.
It literally a lot of it is very derivative of Grave Encounters, but it's better than Grave Encounters.
Okay, right, okay.
So I always like to give bonus points for originality when it comes to horror movies. I haven't seen that before. This one I'd seen it all before.
Yeah,
but it was done so well. Yeah. I highly recommend.
Okay, you can see
watching this. Yeah, I thought because the scares, even though you see the scares coming a mile away, they're done so well. I thought they were actually still.
The payoff is still good. Yeah,
the payoff is still there.
Okay.
So 2 thumbs up for Ganjayam Haunted Asylum, folks, a Korean horror movie. If you can find it and you're looking for a good scary movie, because I feel like if you watched it alone, you probably would
get freaked out.
Yeah, you would.
Okay.
And 2 thumbs down for The Taking of Deborah Logan. That sucked. So you can skip the shit out of that one. But yeah, that'll do it for. I haven't done any horror movies in a little bit, so I've got a couple more lined up for this weekend. So stay tuned, folks. Stay tuned.
Fantastic! I can't wait.
I'm excited. I know. So we'll get into them in the next episode.
Excellent.
But yeah, Keith, what's up with you?
Not much, man.
Okay, great. Let's get into it then.
Okay.
Well, you didn't sound like you had much shit there locked and ready to go.
No, I didn't. You know, like with I know usually we go through like the hauntings in my house, but it's been quiet for a while now. I'm actually, to be honest, I'm getting a little bit self-conscious.
Really?
Like, am I not fun to be haunted? What's wrong with me?
Ghost is bored of you, I think.
Right? That's not cool.
Like, moved on.
Am I not being scared enough? Am I being too scared? I can change, Ghost.
I think we talked about this before. I think maybe you're too into it.
You're
too
eager.
needy.
Yeah,
you know,
I can see that.
You're like she texts you once, you reply 100 times with heart emojis. That's it. You're kind of like, where's my hug? You're like turning into one of those guys.
I've given the ghost the ick.
Yeah, you're giving them the him, he, she, they, the ick, that. Yeah. So maybe just cool the jets a little bit.
Okay, I'll play it cool. I'll wait for them to haunt me first. Or
just let it be organic, I think.
Okay, that sounds good.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. Maybe in the next episode, you'll have more for us. But we're not talking about the next episode, Keith. We're talking about this episode. And what are we talking about today?
Oh, we're talking about a really good one today. We're talking about New England vampires.
Back to New England. We tell probably far too many stories in the New England area.
I would say not enough.
Okay. Okay, fair enough then.
And this is going to be one of them.
It's
a really good one. It's very exciting. So let me set the mood for today, maybe.
Please do.
Okay. So I'll set the mood with a little story of what we're about to talk about today, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very spooky and true tale. So the year is 1799. We're in New England, Exeter, Rhode Island, to be exact. It's autumn. A cold wind rustles through the bare branches while dead leaves crunch underfoot, and the smell of pumpkin spice is in the air, or whatever the equivalent is back then.
I'm not sure if they had pumpkin spice lattes in 1779, but you never know.
Whatever it was.
Or 1799.
Raisins or something.
Yeah.
Stutley Tillinghast, a local apple farmer and father of 14.
14 with a name like Stutley Tillinghast. I see why he'd have so many kids. He really wants to pass that name on. That's like a hell of a name. So you want to make sure that's going to go down through the generations. You have to have some surviving kids.
Right? Didn't work. I don't know a single Tillinghast.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll find out why.
Andy Tillinghast, listen, right into the show.
Let us know. So anyway, he wakes up suddenly in the dead of night, drenched in sweat after a chilling and foreboding dream. In it, he's working in his orchard when he hears his daughter, Sarah, call out to him. He turns to find her, but Sarah is nowhere to be seen.
Wow.
So then he looks back at the trees, and half his orchard has withered. The fruit has turned black and begins to rot on the branch, and the stench of decay is absolutely overwhelming. Exactly half of his orchard is dead. Now, the dream was so vivid, when he woke up, he couldn't fall back asleep. His wife, Honor, managed to calm him down after a while, brushing it off as, just a bit of stress. But Stutley, he couldn't shake the feeling that it had meant something terrible. So he confided in a local pastor, who again brushed it off and told him not to worry about it. But Stutley did worry. And he was right.
Oh.
So not long after his dream, Sarah, the daughter from the vision, she fell ill. She lost her appetite, her strength faded, she grew pale, she coughed constantly, and wasted away before anyone could help.
Damn.
Doctors were called and she was diagnosed with consumption. But, unfortunately, there was nothing they could do. Sarah Tillinghast was dead within weeks. But this was only the beginning.
Ooh.
So James, the youngest son, he began complaining of a sharp pain in his chest. When asked where it hurt, he pointed to his heart and he whispered, "Here, where Sarah touched me." And soon, he was gone too.
Whoa.
Then Andres got sick, then Ruth. All of them shared the same terrifying story. Sarah was visiting them at night. standing by their beds, whispering that she was cold, that she needed them to come with her. One by one, the Tillinghast children began to fall. Even Hannah, the eldest daughter, who lived miles away, began seeing Sarah in her dreams. She came back to the family, and not long after, she died as well. Her mother, Honor, she wasn't spared either. She woke one night to find Sarah standing at the foot of her bed saying, "Mama, I'm lonely, so cold. Won't you come with me?"
Damn, that's creepy.
Right? So Stutley, he was desperate for answers, and that's when one of his farmhands came to him with a story. Rumours from neighbouring towns, tales of the dead who refused to stay buried, ones of spirits who returned to drain the life from the living. New England, it seemed, was being haunted by vampires!
The vampires!
The vampires! So it sounded insane, but honestly, what else could be happening?
No, I don't know, Keith.
I don't know.
There's only one logical explanation.
Right. So, Stutley and two farmhands, they went out to the family plot and they began digging up the graves, looking for signs of vampirism, starting with the most recent and working their way back. One by one, the bodies showed signs of natural decay, except for one.
Ooh.
Sarah.
Damn.
Though she'd been buried for nearly 6 months, her body was almost untouched. Her skin was still full of colour. Her nails and her hair looked as if they'd grown. There was fresh blood even found within her heart, and her eyes were open. She looked alive.
Damn.
Stutley, heartbroken but determined, did what the folklore demanded. He cut out Sarah's heart, he doused it in oil, and he set it on fire. Once the ashes were scattered, the coffin was closed and the haunting stopped. No more midnight whispers, no more ghostly visits.
Well, there's only one way to be sure.
You have to be sure. You
Yeah.
gotta be sure. Now, unfortunately, Ezra, the eldest son, he still died. His illness had progressed too far, but Honor made a full recovery. In fact, she actually went on to have 2 more children.
He had to replace him. He
Exactly.
lost all his kids.
Right. And Stutley, well, he never had the nightmare again. But he came to understand what it meant. In the fall of 1799, he had 12 living children. 6 had died. Exactly half his orchard.
Ooh, that's good.
Isn't it?
That is really
It's a good story.
I love that. Holy shit. And guess what, folks? I mean, it's real. But it also sounds like an X-Files episode.
It does. It does sound like an X-Files
Yeah, it
episode.
sounds like, when Mulder's like saying at the end, and we couldn't figure out what was up. You have to do a really fucking boring ass David Duchovny voice.
Yes, yeah.
And then the aliens came, and then 6 had died. Exactly half his orchard.
Yes, nice.
Closing fog.
Yeah.
That's what he says. Does he say that? I don't think so, but I'm saying it.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
We should start saying that if he doesn't say it.
Yeah. So if you haven't figured it out yet by Keith's intro or the title of this episode, today, folks, we are talking about New England vampires. Now, vampires come in all shapes and sizes and a very wide range of adaptations, from Bram Stoker's Dracula, Keith's old neighbor,
Me old pal.
to the sparkly teens of Twilight. But New England's vampire wasn't quite as elegant or seductive or sparkly. This one feeds on its victims from the grave. You know what your story actually reminded me? It reminded me a lot of Salem's Lot. You know, the vampires, the children show up at the window and they're like, "Come play with me," or whatever. Yeah. So in this video, So in this whole episode of the podcast, we're going back to a time when an outbreak of consumption. Oh God, I got the consumption. What we now know as tuberculosis, of course, was ravaging families across New England. Now, consumption, tuberculosis, was a brutal illness. People wasted away slowly, coughing up blood, their bodies growing paler and weaker by the day. And because science hadn't caught up yet, folk were desperate for answers. Some believed the disease wasn't just spreading, it was being carried by a loved one who'd already died. Not their physical body, but their spirit, rising from the grave, draining the life from their family one by one. In desperation, people exhumed the bodies of their dead mothers, dead brothers, dead children, looking for signs of vampirism. Hearts were cut out, as Keith so eloquently described. Organs burned, all to stop a deadly, invisible monster that no one understood. Which is what we legally have to say, but in reality, they understood it pretty good.
They do.
Bring it back, question mark? Maybe. Just put it out there. This chapter of American history is often forgotten or laughed off as superstition, but it's a chilling reminder of what happens when fear outruns fact, when folklore fills in the blanks that science leaves behind. Most chilling of all, these stories aren't just legends, they're true. So, let's give it a go. Now, let's first give a bit of a BG on TB, bit of a background on tuberculosis. It traces back 10,000 to 11,000 years. So tuberculosis, it's been around for a minute. It's an ancient plague, right? Known by many names throughout human history. The ancient Greeks called it phthisis, and in the Middle Ages, it became known as scrofula. By the 1700s, people started calling it the White Plague because of the pale, ghostly appearance of those afflicted. And in the 1800s, it earned another grim nickname: consumption.
Oh.
Finally, in 1834, a German professor of medicine gave the disease the name we all still use today, TB, tuberculosis. Tuberculosis mainly attacks the lungs, but it can also spread to other parts of the body. The symptoms were, well, pretty brutal, to be honest. You got the violent coughing fits, enough to break ribs and cough up blood. Fever, night sweats, weight loss so severe it left people pale, hollow-eyed, and skeletal. For those of you out there who are video gamers, tragically, you will be all too familiar with TB from Red Dead Redemption 2.
Ah, very good.
Keith won't get that reference, but those who listening will be all too familiar with TB, unfortunately. So sometimes there were hallucinations or fever delirium before death came, all sounding like quite the trip before, well, you got swept off to the next place.
Right, it's mad. It's just like The Walking Dead hallucinating.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it literally sounds like a vampire zombie plague.
Right, yeah.
That just took people away. And so with these kind of symptoms, it's easy to see why people believed the dead were coming back to drain the life out of the living. Especially when dying kids, delirious with fever, swore up and down that they were being visited at night by a sibling who'd already died. Today, we know this infectious disease is caused by bacteria that spreads through the air when an infected person coughs or speaks. Once you breathe in those TB germs, you become infected. And you're most likely to catch it from someone you spend time with every day, like a family member, of course. So enter 19th century New England. New England at this stage was in the grip of a full-blown TB epidemic. These days, TB is treated with a course of antibiotics. However, back in the day, it was basically a death sentence. The disease was killing off entire families. And in fact, get a load of this, folks, nearly a quarter of all deaths in the northeastern United States at the time were blamed on consumption. So with little understanding of how diseases worked, people looked at the pattern. One person died, then another, until finally the whole family was dead. Therefore, that leaves you with one chilling conclusion. The first family to go died of consumption. They came back into vampiric form, wings and all, infect the rest of the family, and then they just keep knocking them out. I mean, it's a leap, but not much of a leap. Stranger things have happened. Sure, wasn't there a whole... I'm not mentioning this. I'm not bringing it up, okay, to Salem. I'm not putting it in there.
You gotta put it in.
He put in the little... I just want to focus on him to know that he put in, got it in, with a winky face in the research notes. And he's not... We're not doing it.
You gotta say, man, it's in the script.
No.
Salem.
Alright, so from the New England witchcraft panic to the New England vampiric panic. The concept that correlation doesn't imply causation was not something that would have crossed their mind. People believed correlation and causation are the same thing. So if people are dying, it's got to be a vampire killing them all, right, obviously. But I mean, not strictly true, but that's what they believed at the time. So let's go with it.
Yeah.
People saw their families die one by one, drawing those conclusions. And people in these isolated and rural areas ended up turning to what they did know. Folklore. The dead must be feeding on the living. That belief led to exhumations, heartburnings, and some other very gory attempts to stop a vampire outbreak that never existed.
When we talk about people of these days, they're definitely limited by knowledge, but this doesn't mean that they were dense. In fact, someone did actually figure out that TB might be caused by tiny invisible organisms way back in 1720. So a guy named Benjamin Martin, he suggested that consumption was caused by microscopic creatures called animalcules, infecting the lungs. And when you know it, he was right. But of course, no one believed him. They were like, yeah, shut up, Benjamin. It's clearly vampires.
Cooler explanation, let's be honest.
It is. Yeah, I'd be one of those people shouting at him. Now, it wasn't until 1882, more than 160 years later, that Dr. Robert Koch actually proved TB was caused by bacterium. Here's a little fun fact for you. Most of the vampire panic happened in rural New England, and the reason for this was because in these rural areas, doctors were scarce, there was folk beliefs and superstitions, and they had a really strong grip. Families were very isolated and relied more on tradition than on modern medicine. Meanwhile, though, in less rural areas, something a bit weird was happening. So in places like cities, consumption was started to be seen as a bit of a romantic disease. So in the 1820s and beyond, some upper-class people believed that the disease put sufferers into this kind of euphoric and enlightened state. TB became almost fashionable among the wealthy. Pale, hollow-cheeked women with glassy eyes were considered delicate and ethereal. Some even applied chalky makeup to achieve this corpse-like hue of a consumption victim. Now, I couldn't find any confirming that rural New England were buying into this whole upper-class city slicker notion, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say probably not, because they were too busy fighting vampires.
Of course, they were down in the streets while the rich people were trying to pretend to be victims.
Right.
But folks, now that we got all that lame science bullshit out of the way, let's get to the vampire.
Yes.
The vampire of New England. Where did the notion come from that the spirits of vampires were rising from the grave to feed on families? Well, to answer that little question, we need to go back to the year 1725, when villagers in Central Europe were in the grip of a full-blown hysteria. That frenzy would later become known as the Great Vampire Epidemic. I love this story. It's full of this so cool epidemics.
We might cover this
at a later stage.
Yeah, it's really good.
I love that. Yeah. That sounds
lots
great.
Of stories. It's really cool.
Okay, great. So the Great Vampire Epidemic, also known as the Vampire Controversy, was probably the most widespread vampire panic in recorded history. It's mainly swept through the eastern and southern parts of the Austrian Empire from 1725 to the 1750s. During that time, government officials and military physicians were confronted with a wave of sudden, unexplained deaths. Locals, in an attempt to stop what they believed was a supernatural threat, began exhuming the corpses of loved ones and neighbors, burning them, or driving stakes through their hearts to put an end to these so-called vampires. The epidemic was kicked off with a now infamous case, a Serbian peasant named Petar Blagojević. Petar was from the little village of Kisijevo, which is in modern-day Serbia. He was a simple man living a simple life, tending to his fields and livestock. It was after his death, in 1725, that the true horror of his story, that's when it only began. Legend has it that the old man crawled out of his grave at night, walked among the living, and visited his son's house asking for food. After he refused to feed the evil spirit, the son was found dead the morning after. Blagojević's spirit is said to have caused the violent death of 9 other people. All of his victims perished within 48 hours of sudden illness and loss of blood, and Blagojević's wife swore the ghost of her husband visited her asking for food. We should be covering this story.
It's good, isn't it?
That sounds way more interesting than these dumbass New Englanders.
We should. I think we definitely will get into this because there's way more details.
Okay, we'll do when we get to the European vampiric panic.
Yeah, we'll deep dive into this more. It's good.
Okay. So other survivors, though, of Blagojević's vampire claimed he appeared to them at night, choking or attacking them. So villagers were convinced that Blagojević turned into a vampire. So they reported it to the Austrian authorities, which took them, it was taken extremely seriously at the time. An official inquiry was carried out with an Austrian military officer at its helm. The exhumation of Blagojević's body shocked the villagers. When the coffin was opened, the body was extremely well preserved. His hair and nails had grown, and he had a trail of fresh blood around his mouth, which was a ding-ding for vampirism. In a desperate attempt to free themselves of this evil, the villagers, under the guidance of authorities, pierced a stake through his heart and burned his body. This reportedly ended these strange deaths in Kisijevo. That case, and others like it, there were over 30 similar ones around the time, and we'll get to it in a future episode. Well, that was published in official documents, even newspapers. And just like that, the vampiric panic went viral, or viral by, 300 years ago standards anyway. A number of writings on vampire folklore came out during and after the Great Vampire Epidemic. One such writer was Antoine Augustin Calmet, a French theologian and scholar who had produced many writings on religion. One of his works from 1746 really stands out as it dives deep into the belief in vampires. In it, Calmet actually entertains the idea that these blood-sucking creatures might be real, folks. Thanks, Calmet, pointing out what we already know. He pulls from accounts in multiple cultures and countries and breaks down how someone might end up being labeled a vampire.
There was one other particular piece of writing. This is particularly noteworthy, and it actually even links vampirism to consumption. And it's by another Frenchman, François-Marie Arouet, who wrote under the pen name
Voltaire.
He was a French philosopher and is best known for, standing up for civil rights and social reform. In his Philosophical Dictionary of 1764, he discusses the outbreak of the supernatural menace which was plaguing Europe, the vampire. Here is an excerpt from his book. These vampires were corpses who went out of their graves at night to suck the blood of the living, either at their throats or stomachs, after which they returned to their cemeteries. The persons so sucked waned, grew pale, and fell into consumption, while the sucking corpses grew fat, got rosy, and enjoyed an excellent appetite.
I love that. They had a great time.
They loved it. There no longer remained any question but to examine whether all these dead were raised by their own virtue, by the power of God, or by that of the devil. The result of all this is that a great part of Europe has been infested with vampires. Now, take that the vampire victims could contract consumption as a result of being fed on is pretty compelling. And while there's no direct evidence that New Englanders read his work, ideas do travel. His words may very well have made their way across the Atlantic, tucked in with the immigrants and their folklore.
So all that, folks, takes us back to 19th century New England, and the New England vampiric panic was in full swing. You got families in rural America watching loved ones waste away, pale, coughing up blood, fading by the day. It's not hard to see why they might start thinking something more than illness was at play. Some believed that consumption wasn't just a physical disease, but a spiritual one. That if a dead relative still had blood in their heart, it meant some occult force was draining life from the living and channeling it back to the corpse. Not in a digging out of the grave and biting necks kind of way, but through some kind of more invisible, supernatural bond you'd have, like with the vampire. Interestingly, the term vampire, it didn't actually really show up in American writings until the late 19th or early 20th centuries. The families who exhumed loved ones didn't even say they were hunting vampires or that their family members had turned into vampires. They didn't exactly know what to call the evil they believed was tormenting them. But, they were vampires and everything but term. They were convinced that consumption was more than a disease, it was a curse. A force that didn't just kill you, it came back for you and your family. Your kids, your fucking dog too. It's taking it all!
Got you and your little dog too.
So we've already had one New England vampire story at the beginning of this episode. So let's go back a bit further to what may have been the very first one. In the quiet hills of Dummerston, Vermont, between 1782 and 1798, one of the earliest vampiric exorcisms in New England reportedly took place, right at the heart of a well-respected household. Lieutenant Leonard Spaulding was a decorated war hero who had fought in both the French and Indian War and the American Revolution. After the fighting ended, he became Dummerston's first representative to the Vermont legislature, serving multiple terms through the 1780s, a man of politics, military service, and standing. But none of those things could protect him from what was coming right at him. In May of 1782, his 20-year-old daughter, Mary, died. 5 months later, another daughter, Sarah, aged 19, she too passed away. Then came Esther, only 16, the following July. In 1788, Spaulding himself died at the age of 59. And over the next several years, the family continued to shrink, as if something unseen was bleeding them out one by one. In 1798, several family members were dead. Who would have think that over time, people died?
Shocking,
it's
right?
Wild, isn't it? When one of the remaining daughters fell ill, the family gave up on medicine and turned to folklore. A new theory was creeping through rural New England. The chilling idea that a vampire was behind the slow and relentless deaths. And if that was true, well, folks, there's only one solution. A grim exorcism to root out the evil feeding on the family. Among the superstitions of those days, it was said that a vine or root would grow from coffin to coffin, linking the graves of family members who died of consumption and were buried side by side. And when the growing vine reached the coffin of the last one buried, well, somebody else would soon die in the family, right? And they were only too excited to have another coffin placed beside them. Therefore, to break the curse was to destroy the vine, exhume the last body, and burn the vital organs. The family, desperate for any solution, followed folk beliefs and local superstition, and they took drastic action. The body of the last interred was exhumed, and the vital organs, heart, lungs, and liver, were removed and ritually burned. The Spaldings also reportedly destroyed the notorious vine that connected the graves in an attempt to sever the supernatural channel through which the curse travelled. The daughter, by the way, strangely enough, she recovered from her illness and went on to live a long and healthy life. The surprising recovery only fueled, therefore, the validity of the vampire theory.
The following report it's another fascinating example of vampirism in New England. Captain Isaac Burton, a deacon of the Congregational Church, he'd married Rachel Harris on March 8, 1789. Now, Rachel was said to be young and a beautiful woman, but less than a year after they exchanged vows, Rachel started showing signs of consumption. Her health quickly declined, and on February 1st, 1790, the disease took her to her grave.
Ooh.
Now, not long after Rachel's death, the captain, he remarried. On April 4th, 1791, he wed Hulda Powell, another beautiful woman known for her warm and friendly nature. This captain's got game.
Yeah, nothing stopping him.
Unfortunately, though, she too became ill not long after the marriage and began to show signs of consumption. As her health went downhill fast, you can imagine that the captain was starting to wonder, should I begin looking for wife number 3? Instead, a belief took hold of the Burtons' friends and family. They became convinced that Rachel, his first wife, was coming back from the grave to feed on Hulda's lifeblood, draining her from beyond the veil.
That bitch.
Right? Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, I guess.
So
they believed that the only way to save Hulda was to dig up Rachel and reduce her vital organs to ash. Rachel had been buried for 3 years when the deed was done. According to reports, nearly 1,000 people showed up to witness the grim exorcism. What remained of her heart and lungs and liver were removed, placed on a blacksmith's forge, then burned until there were nothing but ashes. A priest, he presided over the ceremony and blessed the remains, hoping to purge whatever demonic force was afflicting Hulda. Shockingly, didn't work.
Damn.
Right? Hulda, she succumbed to consumption on September 6th, 1793. Captain Burton, undeterred though, he went on to marry a third wife. And then a fourth. I think he's a vampire.
I know. I think he's probably the problem at this stage. Yeah. And so far, families had just been exhuming their loved ones and desecrating corpses, which is pretty horrific. You might say a pretty darn horrific thing to do is to dig up ma or grandma or your daughter, actually, in a lot of these cases, and chop
them up and burn her insides.
Man, that's actually very grim and horrific.
Isn't it? Yeah, and like some of these were dug up like 3 years later.
Yeah, you can't imagine there'd be much left.
Right, at
that point.
Yeah, well, one of them had still had blood in the heart.
Well, vampire. Right, I take it back, actually. They deserved it. Let's do it again. But as the vampiric panic began to spread, people started taking things even further. Enter the story of Nancy Young. In 1806, Captain Levi Young, his wife Anna, and their infant son left Connecticut to settle on a newly acquired farm in Foster, Rhode Island. The following autumn, the family celebrated the birth of another child, a daughter they named Nancy. As the Youngs prospered, their family grew to include 8 children, all of whom helped with planting, harvesting, and tending to livestock. But the good times didn't last. In early 1827, tragedy struck. Nancy came down with what seemed like a severe cold, but her fever worsened quickly and she began to waste away. On April 6, 1827, Nancy died of what was then called galloping consumption, basically an aggressive, fast form of tuberculosis. A few months after Nancy's death, her sister Almira fell ill with the same symptoms. The sickness crept through her slowly but steadily, draining her strength until she was bedridden. Levi called for a doctor, but the physician was helpless against the same strange fever that had claimed one daughter already. Desperate, and with more of his children beginning to show the same signs, Levi turned to folklore, where he'd heard similar stories. And so, in a last-ditch attempt to stop the evil that was picking off his family one by one, he asked his neighbors and friends to exhume Nancy's body and burn it. Once her body was unearthed, it was placed on a pile of branches and dry brush and set ablaze. The entire family stood around the fire inhaling the smoke from Nancy's burning remains, believing it might cleanse them of whatever malevolent force had taken hold. And boy, oh boy, that smell's going to be hard to get out.
Yeah, that sticks with you.
I can only imagine how macabre the scene must have been, a family surrounded by flames and smoke breathing in the ashes of their daughter, in the hopes it would save the rest. And it didn't. Womp womp.
No. Shocking.
Almira died just months later, and in the years that followed, 4 more of Levi and Anna's children succumbed to consumption. None of them were exhumed. I mean, trying it once is probably enough. We're like, it didn't work when we exhumed Nancy. Let's just let it run its course at this point.
I didn't like it. I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah.
So in these late 1700s to 1800 cases, we've seen family members exhuming loved ones looking for signs of vampirism, like fingernails and hair that had grown or fresh blood in the heart, and then burning the vital organs. In some instances, like the one we just talked about, they even inhaled the smoke from the ashes like a big old long cigarette.
Yeah.
Like, we're at peak Panic at the Vampire disco here. But you'd think that by the 1850s, an era of railroads, early photography, and even the invention of the dishwasher.
Wow.
Right?
That's wild.
People might have developed a bit more cop on. But no, the fear of vampires was still very real and going strong. Interestingly though, it wasn't until 1990s that historians and archaeologists began to understand just how widespread this panic was. So in Griswold, Connecticut, a group of kids, they were playing near a gravel pit and they stumbled across bones. One ran home to tell his mother, who was skeptical, until he came back with a skull. He's like, oh shit,
yeah,
there is bones.
Believe me now.
So police were initially called, suspecting that the burials might be the work of a local serial killer, Michael Ross, aka the Roadside Strangler. But it didn't take long to realise that the bones were far too old. When archaeologists stepped in, they determined that the hillside contained a colonial-era farm cemetery. New England is full of these unmarked family plots, and 29 burials in this case were typical of the era. Simple wooden coffins, no jewellery, little clothing, and arms crossed or laid at the sides, except for burial number 4.
Well, that's crazy though. So they just stumbled across this whole unmarked cemetery. It wasn't like an unmarked grave. It was like, there was 29 people buried in this whole graveyard.
Yeah, like I say back in the day, it was like, you had you had family land, and that would stay in the family for generations, and the land was so big, they had their family plots.
Yeah,
and they just buried in there, but... So back to the story. So when they found the burial, everything seemed normal, except for the burial number 4. This one stood out. There was a red painted coffin that had been smashed. The skeleton inside had been completely rearranged. The skull and thigh bones had been placed on top of the rib cage and spine in a grim and unmistakable pattern. A skull and crossbones.
Holy shit, that rocks.
Isn't it? That's cool.
That's crazy.
So it was a deliberate symbolic act to stop the dead from rising. Later analysis showed the beheading and other injuries, including the broken ribs, which was likely an attempt to get to the heart, had occurred about 5 years after the death.
Wow.
So the man, he was dubbed as JB55, based on the initials and age carved into the coffin. He likely died of tuberculosis, and the way his body was reburied screamed vampire panic. So this discovery, it reignited interest in New England's vampire folklore, and led to the uncovering of more cases nearby. Enter the Jewett City vampires. So in the 1850s, the Ray family of Jewett City, Connecticut, was hit hard by tuberculosis. Henry Ray and his 2 adult sons, Lemuel and Elijah, died from consumption. Then, in 1854, a 3rd son, Henry Nelson Ray, also fell ill. The surviving family members, terrified and desperate, they turned to folklore. They believed one of the deceased, buried in the family plot, was feeding on the living. Unable to determine which one it was, they said, fuck it, we'll exhume all 3, just to be sure.
Sure.
And they burned all the remains, in the last-ditch effort to stop the spread of death. So this was one of the last known episodes of the full-blown vampire exhumation, but it wasn't the last. That shockingly happened in 1892, which is shocking.
Yeah, that's surprisingly recent.
Like, there was silent movies were around, and not to mention that it had been proved 4 years earlier in 1888 that tuberculosis was caused by bacterium.
Yeah, but that's what they want you to think.
That's what they want. Yeah, that's what you want to think.
I don't believe that, folks. Not for a second. Damn, that's crazy, though. Now, before we finish up with today's episode, folks, we can't not talk about, we can't talk about this whole entire spiel and topic without mentioning the most famous case, and possibly the last, right? That would be none other than Mercy Brown. Mercy Lena Brown lived in Exeter, Rhode Island, a quiet rural farming town with rocky soil and tough living conditions. The Browns lived on a modest patch of land near the edge of town, and their troubles began in December 1882 when Mercy's mother, Mary Eliza, was the first to fall ill with consumption. She died not long after. Then Mercy's sister, Mary Olive, a 20-year-old dressmaker, soon followed. Her obituary in the local paper paints a heartbreaking picture, describing her final hours as full of suffering. But her faith was strong to the end. Quote, "The last few hours she lived was of great suffering, yet her faith was firm, and she was ready for the change." The whole town came to her funeral, where they sang a hymn she had chosen herself. A few years later, Mercy's brother Edwin also became ill. He was a robust young man, working as a store clerk, when he started showing symptoms. He was sent to Colorado Springs in hopes that the climate might help. Meanwhile, Mercy, who had been just a child when their mother and sister died, she remained healthy for nearly a decade. But when her symptoms finally appeared, the disease came on fast and merciless. Her tuberculosis was of the galloping kind, slow to show, but quick to kill once it did. A doctor attended her during those final days, but informed her father, George Brown, that nothing could be done. She died in January of 1892. Her obituary was brief. Miss Mercy Lena Brown, who had been suffering from consumption, died Sunday morning. And that's it. Alright, nothing more to say in her obituary. She died away. Swiftly moving on.
Sometimes people die, okay?
Yeah, shit happens, folks. So you can pretty much tell who the favorite sister was when, like, hundreds showed up to her sister's funeral singing your favorite hymn, saying her faith was firm and she was ready for the change. And then when Mercy dies, it's like, she died Sunday morning. It's raining, by the way, just so you know. And,
Game's at 4.
Yeah, exactly. When Mercy was on her deathbed, however, Edwin, who had returned from Colorado, he too was worsening. After a brief period of hope, he was once again now in decline. The townspeople's prayers, they clearly weren't working, and some began to suggest a darker cause behind the family's misfortune. They approached Daddy George Brown with a theory. Maybe someone in the family plot wasn't truly resting in peace. Maybe one of the women was still feeding on Edwin from beyond the grave. The word vampire was later thrown about by the press, though the locals were a bit more discreet in their wording. After all, they didn't want anybody to think they were crazy. But the idea was clear. If they could find and destroy the source, Edwin might be saved. After all, he's the boy. We gotta save the boy child. He's the male heir. He's the most important one.
But if not, have a huge obituary.
He's gonna have a great funeral. At first, George Brown was deeply disturbed by the suggestion. He found the idea barbaric and didn't believe in it for a second. His local paper even noted that he had never supported the vampire theory, and the Providence Journal echoed this, writing that Brown had, quote, no confidence in the old-time theory. Still, with Edwin's life hanging in the balance, George agreed to discuss it with his son. Quite an awkward conversation, you can imagine how it would go. And after all, what if the townspeople were right? What if, folks, this strange ritual actually worked? Could they really ignore their neighbors and risk Edwin's life for the sake of pride? I don't think so. Reluctantly, the two of them agreed to let the others go full ahead, full steam with the ritual. George made it clear that neither he nor Edwin would attend. But he also made it clear that if there was any chance it could stop the curse from spreading through the rest of his family, you gotta try it. Saying no and losing Edwin would have been too much to bear. And so, on March 17th, Paddy's Day of all days, 1892, the exhumation began. George stayed away. The bodies of Mary Eliza and Mary Olive had long since decayed to bones, but Mercy, having died just a few months prior and in the middle of winter, was unusually well preserved. Her heart and liver were removed and examined. They found what they claimed was fresh blood in the heart. Despite the family doctor insisting that Mercy's lungs showed clear signs of tuberculosis, the villagers said, I don't buy that shit for a second. We got a heckin' vampire right here.
Shut up, medicine man.
They burned her heart and liver on a nearby rock. The ashes were then mixed into a tonic and given to Edwin to drink. Gulp that down, son. Problem solved. Shockingly, Edwin died less than 2 months later after drinking the ashes of his dead sister.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Folks, just a reminder, this is in 1892.
Yeah,
this isn't some, early modern 1700s, 1600s witchcraft bullshit. This is...
It's not that long.
It's not that long ago.
On the scale of things, it's not that long ago.
Which just, I think, makes all the more fascinating and honestly tragic, however, is that George Brown and his community seem to have some gut-level understanding that this illness could be contagious, even if they didn't know about bacteria. I mean, as you said, like, TB had been discovered that it was bacteria causing us years before. 4 years earlier. But they were still like, have you tried drinking the ashes of your dead sister?
Yeah, I hear you, but vampires?
Yeah, I wonder what that tasted like.
Oh, not well.
I can't imagine that tasted good at all. And so, folks, that brings us to the end of the New England vampire panic. What we've covered, by the way, is just a handful of the definite vampire cases. There was a lot more cases we could have gone through, I think, there. But I feel like you guys got the gist of it at this point. You guys know where we're coming from. Michael Bell, author of Food for the Dead, on the trail of the New England vampire. That was an excellent resource for this episode. In his book, he has documented around 80 such exhumations, dating back as far as the late 1700s. And he still believes there could be hundreds more still waiting to be uncovered from the grave. I mean, hell, it's crazy. Like, they only found the bones they found from the
JB55 or in 1990.
Yeah, exactly. The skull and crossbones.
Yeah.
Which rocks. Person like that's probably shit buried all over that whole region of America, northeastern America, and Europe. Fucking hell.
Yeah. It's everywhere there.
Hell yeah.
All of Europe is just one big graveyard.
Basically, yeah. And there you have it, folks. That is the story of the New England vampiric panic.
Yeah, really good. I have a theory of why these vampires were different from the ones in Europe.
Tell me, and it better be good. Let the record show I'm pointing a gun at Keith's head.
So these New England vampire incidents, they happened during an epidemic. And the vampires, they would drain the living from their graves. So maybe they were just working from home. Trying to flatten the curve a little bit. Doing their part.
Ah, very good.
Good for them.
Yeah. Well,
we should all stand outside at 6 o'clock and give them a clap.
I think so, yeah. Well done. Boolabus all around. I thought so.
The real heroes.
All right, folks. There you go. Thank you so much for listening to this whole episode of the That Chapter podcast. Hope you stay tuned. Stay tuned for the next old one, which should be up. Well, it's a fresh episode up every Monday with the audio of a video episode up on Fridays. So that's like a little bonus episodes for you. But we got listener stories coming very, very soon. It's been too long, so we got listener. We keep on saying, we're like, I'll try and make the listener stories a regular thing. We keep forgetting to.
I think someone was mentioning I was seeing on one of the Instagram comments, they were like, oh, you guys said that you're not doing listener stories anymore.
Wait, we never said we're not doing listener. We are definitely still doing listener stories.
It's false news.
Yeah, that's fake news, folks. Fake news. That's somebody from the lamestream media misreporting that. No, we are still doing listener stories, never fear. We just haven't got around to actually doing any lately, but they are still coming. People are still sending in your ghostly stories. Please keep sending them in, and we will get to them eventually. At some point we will, but we promise we will get more into it soon. We really do need to. But for now, that'll do her.
I'll see you.
All right, he said it. All right, thanks, folks. Bye.
He came back with a skull. He's like, oh shit.
Yeah.
There is bones.
Believe me now.
I told you.
That's really good. Yeah.